Jane Schnupp here. Welcome to another of the new Savvy Sightseer video vacation series. Today we are touring parts of Belgium. Although tiny in area, the entire country is barely 1/4 the size of the state of New York, Belgium is nonetheless large in stature. Its geographic location puts it at the crossroads of Europe. It's bordered by France, Germany, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and the North Sea. Battles have been fought over and through Little Belgium, but today it reigns as the de facto capital of Europe and is a multicultural, multilingual nation. Belgium is a very easy place to get around, both by local transport and trains between major cities. I basically split my time between the capital, Brussels, and nearby Bruges, with day trips from each. When looking at maps, you might get confused because some town names are spelled differently based on the map source. Bruges, for example, can be B-R-U-G-E-S on a French version, or Brugge, B-R-U-G-G-E, on a Dutch one. And Ghent can be spelled G-H-E-N-T or without the H. That's because Belgium consists mainly of two distinct cultures, which is evident in their foods and languages. The Dutch-speaking northern Belgium is known as Flanders and accounts for a little more than half of the country's population, roughly 57%, while French-speaking southern Belgium is known as Wallonia and has about 32% of the Belgian people. Also in the mix, but a definite minority, are Germans at about 1% of the residents. Fans of the blockbuster all-star cast movie called The Monuments Men will relate to several places and objects in this video. The movie, headlined by George Clooney, is about a real-life group of Americans tasked with saving valuable artworks toward the end of World War II, and Belgium was a key component of their work. It's a fascinating and very beautiful country, as you will now see. Brussels is broken into two main sections, lower with a well-preserved old town on the left, and upper where you have the royal palace on the right of your screen. It was the vision of King Leopold II, Belgium's monarch in the late 1800s, that the entire area between his palace on a hill in the upper town and all the way down to the town hall in the lower be developed as a center for culture, the Mont des Arts, or the Mount of Arts. It now hosts some of the city's most prestigious museums. The Magritte, showcasing the Belgian artist's work, the Musical Instruments Museum, considered one of Europe's best. There's also the Royal Museums of Fine Arts, the Bellevue Museum, that's the national history of Belgium, as well as a beautiful park area. This was my first main view walking from the train station to the old town. The stately park at the center of Brussels is called the Mount of Arts Garden, and the town hall tower beyond is in the old town. Brussels' royal palace was built in the late 1700s on the site of a former palace called Koudenberg. That had started as a small fortified castle in the 12th century and was transformed through the Middle Ages by successive monarchs into a sumptuous palatial complex, one of the most beautiful palaces of Europe. Unfortunately, Koudenberg burned to the ground in 1731 when a governess fell asleep but left the candles burning. Eventually, the ruins of the palace were pulled down and the ground flattened to construct this new royal district in 1831. Although the palace is the official residence of the Belgian monarchy, it's mainly used for court ceremonies, royal audiences, and state receptions. The royal family instead lives at a castle on the outskirts of Brussels. The palace is only open to the public in August, when the royal family is away on vacation. Koudenberg may be out of sight, but it is not out of mind, nor is it actually gone. In 1986, the government decided to excavate the buried old palace complex. It wasn't until 1998 that they finally unearthed the palace's main building. The ruins were covered with a concrete slab so that further excavation could be conducted, and a permanent museum of the ruins was opened in 2009. Here is what had been the main street, which ran along the outside wall of a massive banqueting hall called the Aula Magna, the largest civil room in this part of Europe in the 1400s. This excavated area, shown in the upper left of the screen, is part of the basement, kitchen, and storage rooms. Below that is the entrance to the basement, and that dates back to about the 12th century. I found it remarkable how intact some areas are and how graceful the arches are throughout. As the king strutted around his castle, he could look out and see the spires of the town hall down in the old town. In 1455, an original small belfry was replaced with this grand 315-foot tall, graceful spire, which is topped with a 16-foot gilded statue of St. Michael slaying the devil. This extension served a greater purpose than just honoring the town's patron saint. It was really the sign of a fierce rivalry with neighboring town Leuven. That town had also constructed a huge and extremely prestigious town hall, and Brussels, well, they just wanted theirs to be taller. The hall, with its intricately carved string of 203 dukes and duchesses, is one of several imposing buildings that form the rectangle known as Grand Place. The old town's magnificent central square is ringed by dignified, centuries-old buildings and aptly fits the description of an architectural jewel that was given to it by the World Heritage Organization. Grand Place is regarded as, quote, the most beautiful central square in the world. This stunning bit of 17th century architecture takes up the entire eastern side of Grand Place and is known as the House of the Dukes, except it wasn't. Its name comes from the bust of dukes adorning it, and it isn't even a single house. It's a facade joining 7 homes. Tucked away at number 13 is the Museum of Cocoa and Chocolate. Vying for attention in the Grand Place is the Majestic King's House. Originally a bread market in the 13th century, it is now the Museum of the City of Brussels, dedicated to the city's origins and development over the centuries and the life of its inhabitants. These are all illustrated with sculptures, altarpieces, engravings, paintings, and models of the city, and tapestries. Brussels was the main center for this industry for almost 400 years. By 1600, 1/3 of Brussels' population of about 60,000 people was employed in the tapestry industry. They wove using the finest silk and exported their product all over Europe to decorate the homes of royals and aristocrats. Every other year since 1971, the square bursts into color with the unveiling of the Brussels flower carpet. This fantastic carpet, roughly 250 feet by 80 feet, is made up mostly of begonias and includes some dahlias, grass, and bark. It took over 500,000 flowers and more than 100 volunteers to assemble this one in just under 8 hours. Belgium is the world's largest producer of begonias, about 35 million bulbs each year, roughly 80% of the total world production. A different theme is showcased each time. This 2018 carpet reflected the cultural pride of Mexico because, organizers explained, just like Brussels, this colorful state in central Mexico has a rich tradition in tapestry. The carpet is on display for 4 days in August. Of course, in 2020, the pandemic forced its cancellation, so the next time will be mid-August 2022. Brussels' famous little squirt, the Manneken-Pis, was originally a typical drinking fountain near Grand Place. The 15th century statue has a variety of legends attached to him, from a boy saving the town by putting out the fire with the only tool he had, to the son of a duke who couldn't wait until the end of the procession they were in to empty his bladder, and another one is a witch's vindictive plan. One legend has it that the boy peed against the witch's door. The furious hag decided to put a hex on him, damning the kid to stay in that compromising position until the end of time. A brave bystander who had witnessed the scene quickly replaced the boy with a statue to foil the evil crone. The statue has continued what the little boy started ever since. It's become a tradition of visiting foreign dignitaries to bring a special uniform for the popular Brasilia. In the Museum of the City of Brussels, over 100 of his nearly 900 costumes are displayed, and the original version of the statue is preciously preserved. Another facet of Brussels' lighter side are the lively comic figures and murals everywhere. These are reminders that the city is the birthplace of such popular cartoon characters as Tintin with his faithful dog Snowy, and the Smurfs. With over 700 comic strip authors, Belgium has more comic strip artists per square mile than any other country in the world. It is here that the comic strip has grown from a popular medium into an art in its own right, and they take it very seriously. If you love all things cartoon, you'll really enjoy a museum devoted to the art, the Belgian Comic Strip Center. It opened in 1989 and instantly became one of the main attractions in Brussels. There's also the MOOF, the Museum of Original Figurines. And then there's the larger-than-life depictions of favorite characters along the comic strip trail. This unique walking route lets people see giant painted comic frames of famous comic book heroes on about 50 walls throughout town. On the left, for example, here you have Neron, and then on the right you have Billy the Cat, and in the middle, Tintin and Snowy. Brussels is a study in contrast from serious to lighthearted art, from old to ultra-modern. Standing tall on the city's north end is the Atomium. That's a 335-foot monument left over from the 1958 World's Fair. Although never intended to be a permanent exhibit, its popularity led to it becoming an enduring landmark. The giant depiction of an iron crystal magnified 165 billion times is a symbol of progress and innovation. 5 of the structure's 9 spheres have permanent or temporary exhibitions examining architecture, design, and modern society. And also a great view is provided over Brussels, and even beyond. On a clear day, you can see the Cathedral of Antwerp, 25 miles away. From oversized to miniaturized, a few steps from the Atomium is Mini Europe. Where else can you find Paris's Eiffel Tower a stone's throw from England's Big Ben? Or see 350 of the finest monuments from 80 European cities without ever leaving one city? All of them are handmade at the same scale of 1 to 25. The finalization of Brexit in January 2020, in which the United Kingdom divorced itself from the European Union, Mini Europe was faced with a dilemma. Take out all of the 6 UK buildings or leave them. The decision was made that to remove them would leave gaping holes in the presentation. So they remain, but with alterations. In front of Big Ben are now miniature protesters carrying signs that say, "Miss EU already," and a customs post has been set up for visitors to walk through when entering or leaving the UK displays. Other updates at the park reflect real-life changes, and some are even COVID-19 inspired. There's an elongated bicycle with 2 mask-wearing riders and beer crates reflecting the suggested social distances in the Belgian section. While Mini Europe is a fun excursion, it's also a tool of the EU. The monuments depicted have been carefully selected to champion what the countries have in common and decry what tears them apart. The Arc de Triomphe, with its Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, is an instantly identifiable Parisian landmark, and it also represents Napoleon's battles through Europe and then recurring frictions. Likewise, Berlin's Brandenburg Gate is a reminder of multiple tensions, such as when Napoleon dismantled the quadriga, the goddess of victory in a chariot drawn by 4 horses that topped the famous structure, and he took it back to Paris after conquering the town. And of course, the strife of post-World War II is depicted with the Berlin Wall separating East and West Berlin. Compare this to the real buildings you saw earlier. This exhibit cost almost €400,000 and took 19,000 man-hours to build. Brussels' guild houses surrounding Grand Place represents the tradespeople like carpenters, stonemasons, and boatmen, and reminds visitors of the economic basis of the EU foundation. At the European Parliament in Brussels, more than 700 delegates, representing now 27 nations, meet. Belgium was among the European Union's founding 6 countries following World War II, under the concept that countries who trade with one another become economically interdependent, and a World War III would be less likely then. What started as an exclusively economic mission with the title of European Economic Community has since morphed into both an economic and political body, leading to a name change in 1993 to simply the European Union. The European Commission building is where members deal with the day-to-day aspects of the EU. Here they propose and implement EU regulations and treaties. And then there's the statue of the goddess Europa, who's carried on a spiral of humanity and holding above her head the monetary euro symbol, also a sign of the unity of European people and nations. At the Parliamentarium, the path from independent countries to a united Europe is played out through multimedia displays. Personally, I found this museum's layout a little boring, and definitely something of a propaganda tool. There are more than 100 interactive terminals and screens and projections. Not all of them, though, work very well. Also, there's over 1,400 photos to look at. And the EU mantra is prominently displayed there. Let's be proud that we belong to this union. Let's learn to participate to it and to improve it for the good of all. The United States of Europe. As mentioned earlier, there was a little sibling rivalry existed between Brussels and Leuven, a city about 20 miles to its east. Leuven had grown as an important center of trade from the 11th to the 14th century. Its renowned cloth, referred to as a version of the town name, Leuven, is where we get the fabric name linen. But it was the town's ambitious, new, magnificent, and tall city hall being built in 1448 that had driven Brussels' envy and made it lengthen its spire and top it with the St. Michael's statue. Leuven, although now second tallest in the hall height, won on architectural splendor, and its hall is widely viewed as a masterpiece of Gothic design. Less austere are these fun-loving Leuven residents. On the left, we have a fountain of a young boy affectionately called Funsky. He's a mascot for the town's world-famous university. Founded in 1425, it is one of the oldest and most respected in Europe, and the oldest surviving Catholic university. Some contend that while he is reading a book, Funsky is pouring knowledge into his empty head. Others maintain it's more likely beer, given that Leuven is also the home of Stella Artois beer, first brewed in 1366 at the Den Hoorn Brewery. On the right, overlooking the town's old market square, is a girl who is evidently very excited to see all the shops below. Brussels is a great starting point to see other memorable Belgian towns, like Leuven or Antwerp, which is known for its diamond industry. Moving northwest from Brussels, we come to Ghent, which in the 13th century was one of the most important towns in Northern Europe, owing largely to its textile industry. Its high-end cloth products were in demand throughout Europe, making the town enormously wealthy. It's situated roughly halfway between Brussels and another important Belgian town, Bruges or Brugge. Ghent even played an important role in United States history. It was here that the treaty between Britain and the U.S. was signed, ending the War of 1812. It's impossible to miss the Castle of the Counts in Ghent. It was built in 1180, but with an odd purpose, not to protect the town, but rather to intimidate the residents, who were considered to be becoming a little too wealthy and independent by the local rulers. The rich aristocrats in Ghent had started to expand their influence, translating their prestige into impressive stone houses. So Count Philip decided he was going to show his authority by making his stone castle even more impressive. He could not stand to be outdone in this display of power. He didn't really deter the merchants, though, who continued to prosper, and by the 16th century, only Paris was a greater power than Ghent. Some of Belgium's finest guild houses are along its Grassley Canal. These structures were built over a span from the 12 to the 1900s. There's corn measurers, the custom house, the grain weighers, the free boatmen, all the trades are represented, and on the far left is the stonemason's house. But that's actually a copy of the original guild house, which is a few blocks away. The original dated from 1526, and it, as well as many other buildings in the area, had new facades added in the 19th century. And the city, well, it kind of forgot where it was and thought it was forever lost. Architects used whatever notes and drawings they had of the old building to recreate it and put it along the canal with the other guild houses in time for the 1913 Expo. During renovations in 1976, the original Masons Guild Hall on Catalonia Street was rediscovered. It's since been restored, and the addition of dramatic statues was added to the top. These devilish dancers were created by a local artist, sculptor, and singer-songwriter named Walter de Buck, who said the point of the addition was that now it's a symbol of creativity. De Buck also set about updating an old Ghent event. In 1969, he revived a dwindling carnival tradition and ultimately built it into a major spectacle today. They were setting up for it when I was in the peaceful little town, and I remarked to a guide that I wished I'd come a week later so I could see it. He said, "No, you don't. The town goes from sleepy to madhouse." The Ghent Festival lives on as Europe's largest music and theater festival, with an average of over 100,000 people attending each day. Held at the end of July, there's 10 days of parties, and it includes hundreds of indoor and outdoor activities, 6 international festivals, and cost-free music. All types of music, from pop music, folk rock, rock and roll, hip-hop, jazz, R&B, all are presented on 10 squares. The 2020 festival, of course, was canceled for COVID, but organizers are confident all will be better by next year, and the event is scheduled for July 16th through the 25th, 2021. Ghent's towers and tall buildings make for a very impressive skyline. On the left is St. Nicholas Church. It dates from the 11th century and is one of the oldest and most prominent landmarks in the city. In the middle, with the golden clock, is the town belfry, which I'll get back to in a minute. On the right is St. Barvo Cathedral, which is best known for the incredible artwork it houses. That would be the famous Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, better known as the Ghent altarpiece of 1432. It's a multi-paneled artwork that ranks among the most significant pieces of Christian art in Europe. The large and complex altarpiece, painted by the Van Eyck brothers, Hubert and Jan, suffered a varied history over the centuries. It was dismantled, stolen, and damaged many times, but was restored after World War II. This is one of the works featured in the Monument's Men. Hitler had stolen it for his own museum. It's 11.5 feet tall and 7.5 feet wide when closed. When its hinged panels open, though, it is about 15 feet wide. One of the panels was stolen in 1934 and has never been found. You see in the lower left-hand corner, there's a grayed out panel where it should be. But an expert copy now stands in its place. The altarpiece is considered by scholars to be one of the most ambitious, complex, and coveted paintings of the 15th century. There was even a whole course at Harvard devoted to the study of this painting. Back to that bell tower. A belfry is viewed as a symbol of autonomy and independence for cities such as Ghent. It has different functions. It safeguards the charter from a ruling monarch that defines what privileges the townspeople will have, and also lays out laws for governing trade, and, of course, is the town carillon. The Ghent belfry, built in 1313, has over 50 bells that ring out the town anthem on the hour. All pretty mundane, except there's that dragon on top, which is another whole story. Controversy swirls around it. A Norwegian king gave it to the city of Constantinople. Then a Flemish count had it brought to Bruges in 1200 during the Crusades. Ghent subsequently took the dragon as war booty after a fierce battle with Bruges in 1382 and put it on top of their belfry. Ghent people claim, though, that story is false and say it was designed and built in Ghent in 1377, and they have a receipt for it someplace. But the Bruges people steadfastly maintain it was stolen from them, and that the Golden Dragon had presided over their bell tower. Like Ghent's tower, Bruges' Belfort at Market Square was intended to be an intimidating symbol of the city's importance. Bruges and Ghent share a convoluted history. Both were extremely wealthy due to textiles, both relied heavily on rivers to transport their goods, and both were doomed when the rivers and canals silted up. A canal once ran right through the 13th century complex of halls within the tower, which also served as a warehouse and market hall. Records from 1450 indicate on a given 24-hour period over 150 foreign vessels from 17 kingdoms entered Bruges. One of Bruges' most important buildings is the 12th century small, unassuming Basilica of the Holy Blood. It's wedged in a corner of Berg Square between an impressive town hall and a chocolate shop. Its exterior and first floor do not prepare you for what's upstairs. Level 1 is a stark chapel, which is in sharp contrast to the upper church and its glittering main altar. But the real star of the little basilica is tucked away behind this tabernacle in a large side chapel of the upper church. There is stored the relic of the Holy Blood, a vial believed to hold a scrap of material bearing some of the blood of Christ that was brought to Bruges after the Second Crusade. The relic is taken out once a year on Ascension Day and paraded around the town by the bishop, just as it has been done since the late 1200s. Anyone who has seen the Monument's Men and Hugh Bonneville's fatal efforts to save Michelangelo's Madonna and Child statue from being stolen at Bruges' Church of Our Lady will be in for a major surprise when entering it. Hollywood created an entirely different interior from the church's striking reality. Its steeple is almost 400 feet tall, which makes it the second highest brick building in the world. Building on the current church began in 1225 and took 2 centuries to complete. Michelangelo's masterpiece sculpture, the only one to ever leave Italy during his lifetime, overlooks the tomb of the wealthy Flemish merchant who purchased it back in the early 1500s. The church was also the scene of the royal marriage between King Maximilian I of Austria and Mary of Burgundy in 1477. The sarcophagi of young Mary and her father, Charles the Bold, lie in state in the church's choir section. Maximilian and Mary's union was mostly a political one, joining her Principality of Burgundy with Maximilian's, who was the heir of the Holy Roman Empire. But it also introduced the diamond engagement ring. In 1477, Max had a gold ring fashioned to display flat, thin pieces of diamond in the shape of an M. It's on display at the Diamond Museum in Bruges, which traces the evolution of the town's association with diamonds dating back to 1370, well before Antwerp and Amsterdam got into the business. Bruges also lays claim to inventing the art of diamond polishing, when a young local man hit on the idea in 1476 that to polish the world's hardest substance, you use its own dust. Max and Mary's marriage ultimately cost Bruges dearly. With the tragic death of his young wife from a fall from a horse, the Burgundy fortunes went to widower Maximilian, and Bruges became part of the Austrian Habsburg Empire. His taxes and regulations upset the townspeople, who eventually imprisoned him and then executed his faithful assistant, Lanchal, in front of him. Max's father, the emperor, intervened, and Max promised concessions if freed. Bruges' people were clearly delusional and became known as Bruges fools, because once released, Max recanted his promises, and his wrath rained down on Bruges, along with a curse that the town must keep longnecks or swans on its canals forever in remembrance of Lanchal, whose name roughly translated means long neck. But that was only the start of Bruges' troubles. Maximilian moved the ducal residence to Ghent and turned over lucrative trading privileges to Antwerp, initiating Bruges' decline. It was further hastened along by the silting up of its main river and trade lifeline. Once one of Europe's most important cities, home base for the Burgundy Empire and a burgeoning textile industry, by the 16th century, Bruges was stuck in a holding pattern. For centuries, the impoverished town could make few changes and updates. Bad news at the time, but the basis of its popularity today. Since there simply was no money to replace old buildings with new ones, the historic setting of the Middle Ages has been largely preserved. As word of the virtually still medieval town spread in the 19th century, tourists took an interest, and Bruges was back on the map. The city is loaded with architectural and scenic eye candy, stunning and peaceful reflective canals, towering steeples, its belfry, its majestic town hall, the cobbled streets and exquisite churches all beg for alternative ways to say quaint and beautiful. Exactly what tourists love. I consider this one of my best pictures ever, and these are the views that bring people to this tiny town. St. John's Hospital is another structure I was drawn to. It's a medieval hospital formerly run by nuns and monks, and is one of the world's oldest preserved hospital buildings. It had side entrances directly on the canal, so contagious plague victims could be brought in by water instead of taking them through the streets of Bruges. The old infirmary took patients in from the 12th to the middle of the 19th centuries. Initially, anyone in need of food or bed could come here. The nuns, however, had limited medical knowledge and devoted themselves mainly to the care of the soul. Today it houses a hospital and pharmacy exhibition, as well as the Memling Museum, showcasing 6 paintings by the 15th century artist in what had been the hospital chapel. I like to end all of my programs with the words of Dr. Seuss. Sometimes you don't appreciate the moment until it becomes a memory, and I like to add to that to always remember to celebrate the moments and treasure the memories. I hope you've enjoyed this trip to Belgium. If you have any questions about the program, email me or use the contact page on my website. Of course, I also invite you to visit it to see more of the region we visited today or any of my European destinations. When libraries are again offering in-person presentations, you can check my programs tab to see where I'll be. Until then, visit the library site for more video vacations by Savvy Sightseer. Till the next time then, va vel, au revoir, or just plain bye.